This video is brought to you by Manscaped.com. Recently I picked up an Apple Mac Pro off of Gumtree for $70, and later in the video we'll do something about this bad facial hair with the help of today's sponsor. So, let's get started. Here was the ad I saw on Facebook Marketplace. For $70 including the screen, I definitely couldn't complain. This machine has 16GB of RAM, solid state memory and a Quadro 4800 video card. Although this machine has definitely been dragged around and bumped against things over the last 16 years. But trust me, it could be a whole lot worse than this. The 20-inch cinema display was surprisingly released about 18 years ago. A truly iconic design, and perhaps it would make for a good retrospective video at some point in the near future. There's a generous selection of ports on the back, including digital audio. The video card in here is far superior compared to what it would have originally come with. And to get access to the internals, all you've got to do is flip up this lever. A lock can also be installed to stop unwanted access. Then through the power of video editing, the side panel magically disappears, exposing the rather bland and unofficial looking Quadro video card, with a pinch of dust for extra flavor. The SATA SSD is also dangling here without any drive enclosure. In fact, it's missing all four of the 3.5-inch drive enclosures. I'll think of a solution throughout this video, and these RAM sticks must also run hot to warrant the use of heat sinks as well. So overall, it will need a good cleaning, but I have seen worse. So let's power it up. The boot chime played, however nothing was showing up on screen for a concerning amount of time. No Apple logo or startup progress bar to be seen, likely due to the graphics card. But it did finally boot into macOS Yosemite, an operating system I thought wasn't compatible with this Mac due to the 32-bit EFI. The 480GB SSD is split into two partitions and all 8 RAM slots are filled. So I installed some updates and tested some games, and now nothing shows up on the screen anymore, which isn't ideal. 2022 is a new year, so why not start by looking your best? My friends over at Manscaped are hooking you up with the latest tools and formulations designed specifically for men. They've sent over the Performance Package 4.0, which is an all-in-one men's grooming and hygiene kit. Now my facial hair could definitely do with a trim, so let's begin. Maybe once more. That's more like it. The first item in the Performance Package 4.0 is the Lawnmower 4.0 Body Trimmer. This is Manscaped's 4th generation electric waterproof trimmer with skin-safe technology. This reduces nicks and cuts on the most sensitive parts of the body, and I must say it also did a nice job on my face. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a super smart cordless charging system and LED indicator lights to know just how much juice you've got left. It's even got a travel lock feature. If you press the power button 3 times, it'll lock so it can't go off in your bag. There's also other goodies included with the Performance Package 4.0, including the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and the Crop Reviver Ball Toner Spray. The Crop Reviver is a convenient spritz with cooling aloe vera to quickly refresh the area whenever you need it. There's even a nose and ear trimmer called the Weed Whacker. For a limited time, get all this plus 2 free gifts, the Shed travel bag and a pair of Manscaped anti-chafing boxer briefs. Simply go to manscaped.com today for 20% off plus free international shipping. That includes the free gifts using my promo code PSIVE at checkout. Manscaped, always use the right tools for the job. Back to the currently not working Mac, which does still play the boot chime. Even after a PRAM reset, I didn't have any luck. Since the Quadro video card in here isn't displaying an image on startup, I thought I'd maybe try swapping it out. In its place, I installed a dusty old 7300 GT, the card that this would have actually shipped with back in 2006 that I had in a spare Mac lying around. Now, this GPU doesn't look official. In fact, it has more VRAM than the 4800s should have. A similar listing for one online said the flashed Quadro 4800s are based on the GTX 260 core. I asked on Twitter and one user mentioned it looking exactly like an OEM version of the GTX 260, which is often sold with 1.8GB of VRAM, just like this card. So it is certainly one of these firmware flash GTX 260 cards, and the listing also mentioned it not being compatible with the first gen Mac Pro, so that might be why it displays a black screen on startup. This card is far weaker than the Quadro, but has native Mac support, meaning you'll get to see the boot logo and any errors that may be plaguing the startup. It was producing video with the older card installed, however the boot EFI patch was clearly overwritten. This Mac was able to run an unsupported OS thanks to a bootloader patch like this, and to install the patch again, I had to install a natively supported version of macOS. This installed without issue. Now I can apply a new boot patch that will allow us to boot to the macOS Yosemite installation once once again. First, you're going to need to download the modified boot.efi file created by Piker, which is linked in the description below. It's probably best to place this file on your desktop. Next, you'll have to open up the command terminal. From here, type in the following: defaults write com.apple.finder apple show all files yes. This allows us to see every file, even ones that are hidden by default. For these files to be visible, you must restart the Finder. Hold down the Option key and right-click on the Finder icon, then press Relaunch. Next, in the terminal window, type in sudo space bash. You'll be asked for your password, type it in and then press Enter. Then navigate to the new OS X installation, library, core services. In this folder, you'll find the boot.efi file, which is currently locked. In the terminal window that's still open, type chflags space no use chg with a space after that command. Drag in the boot.efi file. Its path will be displayed in the terminal. You can now press Enter to unlock the file. Now that the file is unlocked, drag the new modified boot.efi file into the core services folder. Press Authenticate, then replace the existing file. The next command you'll enter in terminal is chflags uchg. Add a space after this command and once again drag the boot.efi file into the terminal. Press Enter and the file will be locked once again. Go back to the main folder in your Yosemite installation, locate the USR folder, then enter the standalone folder, i386, then you'll want to drag in the modified boot.efi file, which will replace the existing file in this folder. Now to boot to the Yosemite installation, go to System Preferences, Startup Disk, and select the disk partition with the newly modified OS. With my fingers crossed, I started the Mac Pro once again. Relievingly, it did start up, with some graphical glitches caused by the old card not being supported. With the 7300 GT out, the newer Quadro card could be slopped back in. Now the machine was back and running 10.10 Yosemite once again, until it suddenly started to have kernel panics on startup. I had to put the old graphics card back in to even find this out. It would still boot into the 10.7 installation, so it must have something to do with the Yosemite installation on this machine. But fear not, I do have a plan, and it involves creating a macOS installation, but using a newer device that can natively install more recent versions. Here's a 2010 MacBook Pro I made a video on last year. I temporarily put in an SSD, and this will end up going in the Mac Pro, so I didn't bother installing mounting screws. This time we'll be installing macOS 10.11 El Capitan, which is the absolute newest version of Mac that will run on the first gen Mac Pro. Previously I used this SSD for Steam games on that Minisforum mini computer, and I'll wipe that partition and rename the drive Macintosh HD. Oh, I mean, I would, but the S key doesn't seem to work anymore. Macintosh HD it is. A short time later, the MacBook Pro was running El Capitan. Now it's time to put that SSD into the Mac Pro. But, oh no, we're still having boot troubles. And this is likely due to the new installation not having the bootloader patch files applied. So I went through and did it again. The only difference being I applied it to the new El Capitan installation instead of the Yosemite one. With it applied, I could restart the Mac and hope for a good result. And yes, it did actually work. The old GeForce 7300 GT graphics card only shows up as 7 megabytes due to it not being supported. I put the Quadro card back in and it ran completely fine. And let's hope we have no more problems. Before I try running some applications on this Mac, the cinema display definitely needs a wipe down. Lens cleaning solution and a microfiber cloth work very well for this. First of all, I tried the graphical benchmark Unigine Heaven, which is largely GPU intensive. The Quadro scores an acceptable 592 points. Doing a CPU upgrade and adding dual quad-core CPUs would greatly increase the multi-core speed. However, the base model 5150 processors here are doing okay and score 549 points in Cinebench R20. Now onto some games. First of all, here's Minecraft. Sadly, you can't run the latest version on here as it requires Java version 17 to run, which only runs on macOS 10.14 and newer machines. Older versions, as seen here, do still run well though. Super Tux Kart with the graphics settings on high runs great on here as well. Even more impressive when you consider the resolution of this screen. Half-Life 2 is a game that was pretty new when this Mac was released. On high settings at 1050p, it maintains well over 60 frames per second. It's one of the many Source games that thankfully run on macOS. Another Valve Source Engine game is Left 4 Dead 2, a zombie survival FPS released in 2009. It's a good looking game and one that runs very well even on such a high resolution. And before I clean it out and redo the thermal paste, I thought I'd do a bit of a stress test running Cinebench, Unigine Heaven and screen recording at the same time with the fan set to 1000 RPM. Surprisingly, the processors were only reaching 60 degrees Celsius, but I'll redo the paste regardless. The Mac Pro is still one of Apple's desktops that can be easily upgraded, even the newest model. You could even put up to 32GB of DDR2 RAM in this thing, which is a crazy amount for 2006. And this firmware flash GTX 260 would actually cost a lot more to buy online than I paid for this whole computer bundle. The Kingston A400 SSD in here also costs near what I paid for the Mac if you were to buy it brand new, which is kinda crazy. While the hard disks all use a SATA connector, I was surprised to see that the DVD drive was still using an older IDE interface, and the constant airflow over the drive had led to quite a bit of dust and moisture building up on the surface. The power supply is actually held in place by a few screws hidden amongst the drive bays. This is a beefy power supply rated up to 980 watts. Sadly, the adhesive near the connectors had actually melted slightly and got all over my hands. Getting access to the processors required me to first unscrew the RAM tray caddy, which is attached to the metal shroud for the dual Xeon 5150 CPUs. The large front inlet fans are only held in place by a single screw in the 1-1 Mac Pros, unlike what a few online tutorials had led me to believe. And here we can see just how much dust was obstructing the airflow through the cooling fins. In the future, I should probably wear a mask while cleaning dusty computers out. With some of the dust removed, I can now actually see the Torx T15 screw heads at the base of the coolers. Some of them were a little bit tricky to remove, and you'll definitely need a really long bit to reach all the way to the screws. A trick someone on one of my videos mentioned was twisting the cooler ever so slightly to prevent the CPU from being pulled out of the socket. The dried thermal paste can act a lot like a glue, seemingly adhering the chip to the copper slug. All throughout the case, there were a number of dust bunnies, and enough dust to insulate a modern home. How were the temperatures not insanely high in this machine? I will also take all the parts outside to blow even more of the dust out off camera. Due to the sheer volume of air these Macs intake, it's not uncommon to see signs of moisture buildup. This is especially noticeable on fan blades and on metal surfaces, often causing some slight tarnishing. To help remove the crusty old thermal compound, I let some isopropyl alcohol soak in for a few minutes, then it wiped off pretty easily. I then began dusting out the casing, which had no shortage of dust. Off camera, I removed more outside to avoid blowing it everywhere on our table. It is possible to purchase quad-core processors on eBay cheaply to replace the dual-core ones in here, but if you plan on upgrading a Mac Pro, I'd recommend just going for a much newer 4-1 or even a 5-1 model, which won't limit you as much with older quad-core processors. With a thin layer of paste applied over the die surfaces, I carefully mounted the coolers back on, being sure to gradually apply pressure diagonally across the spring-mounted screws. The dusted out fans could be slopped back in, the RAM modules reseated, and I left the sticks in the trays to avoid debris making its way into the slots. And since I was out of drive trays, I cut some foam into shape to hold the SSD in place. This will at very least stop the SSD sagging and potentially damaging the SATA port over time. The grime on the outside can now also be removed with the help of various household cleaners. Eucalyptus oil is great at killing germs and bacteria, while the spray and wipe removes grime and tough stains. And here we have the clean, well-worn first generation Mac Pro. It's quite an iconic design, but boy is it a chunky unit, weighing in at around 20 kilograms. Running El Capitan, it's still supported by most applications thankfully, but that's surely not going to last for much longer. The 20-inch cinema display is also still quite usable for general use. If you do end up buying one of these screens, make sure it includes the power supply. macOS El Capitan is also still capable of running an up-to-date version of Google Chrome, and 1440p YouTube video playback is still absolutely fine. After so many years, this obsolete Mac has still got lots of life left in it. Thank you very much for watching. I was honestly very glad to pick up this computer for $70, and the inclusion of the cinema display was honestly icing on the cake. If you've liked the video, feel free to leave a like, and if you want to see more, definitely consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next video.